Before we get started, I have two questions. Number one for you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the great state of Illinois not scratched in your map of America of places you visited? Let's get that taken. Let's get Illinois taken care of. Get your butt up here. All right.
All right.
Next time there's a major water conference, get on up here.
I will. Yeah, I love talking to the MWRD you guys have. They're great guests.
Yes. Well, that, and then if you have never been so the world's largest water purification plant is in Chicago.
Stickney, right?
No, Jardine. So Jardine is clean water on the clean water side. Stickney's wastewater, Jardine is clean water.
Oh, okay.
And then number two, how many national parks?
I think I'm gonna guess off the top of my head. There's around 8 or 9 scratched in there.
All right. I'm at 22. So keep it up. You're also 20 years younger. You're also 20 years younger than me. So you have a few more years to catch up. So
yeah.
All right. You guys ready? Welcome to B&W Insights. I'm your host, Mark Seifert, and today we have a special episode. We're stepping outside the engineering world and stepping into the world of water and podcasting. Today's guest is podcast host Alex Hahn. His podcast, H2O and Beyond, explores all kinds of different topics in the water field, from the Chicago River to stormwater to desalination. Today, we dive into a multitude of topics with him and see where his podcast is going to go in the future. Ready? Let's get started. Good afternoon, Alex. Thank you for joining us today on B&W Insights. How is your day going?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on you guys' podcast. I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing and really reaching out to me and helping us both share what we love doing.
Yeah, to find someone with a passion of water like we all in the room have is really cool. And I think that's where I want to start is what inspired you to start H2O and Beyond, and why water? What made you choose water?
Like you said before, we all have a passion for this subject, and me specifically, I've been really into environmental science when I was a kid, and I really wanted to do something with my life. Like, I wasn't old enough to vote. I couldn't vote on these key issues, but what I did have was my voice, and I'm a really loud person, and I really want to take advantage of that. So I started this podcast this summer as a way to help bridge the gap between there's all sorts of new innovation going on in this world, but sometimes we just struggle to get it out into the community. So I want to use my podcast as a way to bridge that gap and help the public know about all the cool and interesting things about water.
So anybody who hasn't heard your podcast yet, your daytime job is a high school student. How many years ago did you start getting interested in water? And was there something, as you mentioned, you talk about, not having the ability to vote yet, not being able to contribute to some key issues in the world. What specific moment or experience really sparked you to say, water is a key natural resource, water is the key to life, and move this forward?
Yeah, so this is actually like one of my favorite stories to talk about. So it started when I was in 9th grade. I was a freshman in high school, and it all started one day in my chemistry class when someone from a local nonprofit called the Water Tower, she came in. Her name is Miss Lee, I call her that, and she came in and talked about how wastewater treatment works. And everyone else in the class, they're kind of like as high schoolers do, we wake up at like 5:30 in the morning. Everyone's kind of sleeping, but I was up there. I was raising my hand, asking questions, and I just found it really interesting. And something else that really sparked my interest was I did a competition for this club called Technology Student Association, or TSA. We're like a career and technical student organization that helps prepare kids like me for future careers they might have in STEM. And so I was in this competition called Biotechnology Design. And the prompt that year was actually to find a way to destroy microplastics. Now, you might be wondering like how microplastics and water relate, right? Because I mean, at first they don't seem very related. But do my research, I was researching, and the clothes that we wear every time we wash, I think the number is like 700,000 of these microfibers travel straight to the wastewater treatment plant. And right now, we actually don't have a way of destroying these microfibers that's really cost efficient for people to implement. And so all these fibers end up in sludge, and sludge is something I just really find interesting. As a kid, I don't know if it was just me, but like we were all obsessed with like what our parents would call like potty words. So yeah, my parents at one point had to like ban them from the house. But yeah, I just find the subject really fascinating, and it all went down from a rabbit hole after that. Sludge, wastewater. I'm super interested in this topic.
Well, it's really cool that something that you're sitting in class and something that you're almost forced to do, sit through a presentation, and it really has inspired you to then take this step and this next step. And, I love the name H2O and Beyond. How did you come up with that?
So the way I did it was first I went on like a little Google document. I typed out all the words relating to water. So, like H2O, water, environmental science, all that. And I sort of just started like mixing and matching them in my mind. And then I made a little Google form. I sent out like, what would you like to hear? Like, what would the most interesting title be? And I sent this out to, my teachers and some of the contacts I already had, like the water tower, the teacher that came in and, actually taught me about wastewater treatment. So I sent it to her as well. And, I just looked at all the responses, and H2O and Beyond was the first one. And that's the name I've been sticking with ever since.
So what is the Beyond part? Obviously, when you first probably started the podcast, Beyond was, well, what else can we talk about? But what does Beyond mean to you? What is that H2O and Beyond? So
I think right now, Beyond to me means really looking past like, the physical things, infrastructure, like, our sewers and stuff like that, and really taking a look at the human impact that these events have. And I'll give an example. So just a couple of days ago, I did an interview with someone from the Salton Sea and someone who's done research on the Salton Sea. And if your listeners aren't familiar with that, basically they have a huge problem where the lake is receding and then the dust from the bottom is actually kicking up and is blowing into people's lungs. And so I think the Beyond part means looking past the science of, what's actually happening at that lake and looking at the human effects. And, it's something that could affect them. It could affect, other lakes that are shrinking. So I really think, the human effects.
So it's how science is then interacting with social science and sociology and the interaction with humans, which is a lot of my background in the social sciences, is how do we take science and water and interact with the human being, which I think is really cool. And that's really how the next 10, 20, 50 years is going to play out, is how does water interact with the humans and politics and all of that. So go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you said like there's a lot of intersection between industries. Like you could go take this into like, public policy. It could also take it into, medicine. So there's a lot of interaction between all these different industries that I just find fascinating.
Yeah, and I think they're going to continue to grow as water becomes a more scarce resource. You talk about pollution, microplastics, PFAS, all of the things that are really hitting the world today. Those are just going to continue to grow and grow. Getting back to you hosting a podcast, what's the one thing you had to learn or you learned in the last year when you started this podcast about hosting and talking to all these really, really, I see your guest list has a lot of people with DR in front of their letters. So when you're talking to people who've spent their entire career researching these topics, what's something you had to learn?
Something I really had to learn was to be confident in myself and just trust the process. Like I trust that I've done enough of my own research to be able to hold a conversation with these people. And also, something that's all podcasters must learn is how to look and talk into the camera lens instead of someone actually sitting right in front of you. It's just something so different. So because like right now I'm talking to a camera lens, but your face is sort of like in the corner. So I'm still learning that part, but it's just something that I think I'm getting better, but
you're pretty good at it. Don't sell yourself short. Speaking of your guests,
that's the confidence part.
Speaking of your guests, you've had some really interesting topics. For all of us in the water industry, we look at some of the things that you've studied or researched, and they're worldwide topics. How do you choose your guests? How do you choose your topics?
So I do a lot of, my own research, and in true Gen Z fashion, I watch a lot of YouTube. A lot of my YouTube feed is STEM. So that's actually how I get introduced to a lot of my topics, like, the world's most dangerous lake in California, the Salton Sea. I watched a little YouTube video on that in my free time. And also at the end of every episode, behind the scenes, after I end it, I always ask my guests, like, hey, are they like, do you guys have any other contacts that would love to share what they do? And I'm just really grateful for all these people in the industry that are actually able to share their passion and not look down on a high schooler like me who's really interested in what they're doing and getting that out to the world.
And as you continue to talk to people, I think the one thing you'll realize and you'll see is how small yet worldwide the water industry is. And it's a really tight-knit community, as you probably have seen, that people know a lot of people, and we're always out there to help each other. Yeah. So, as you mentioned to Gen Z, that's something that, a lot of people need to learn about our industry and many industries, is how small they are, even though they're worldwide. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned being a young podcaster. A lot of times we talk about, overcoming adversity or overcoming challenges, and whether it be an engineering thing, an infrastructure thing. But how have you, what challenges have you faced, and how have you overcome them?
So, as a kid, I think like every Gen Z kid wanted to start a YouTube channel. So like before this podcast, I had my own little like gaming thing on the side. That never really worked out because I think one of the biggest problems was actually making people want to watch your videos. So one of the first things I did this time was I called up my best buddy, who's a graphic designer. I was like, hey, dude, I have a little job for you. Would you be interested? And his name is Eric Shu, and just a little shout out to my best friend, Eric Shu. Thank you so much for, helping me really grow this podcast. And, he does all the thumbnails for me and, my little headers, and he's a great help. I think, the biggest problem of like any podcast is, starting from zero and having to grow it and making people actually interested in watching your thing. So that's one thing I've overcome.
So you mentioned earlier you research a lot of the topics before you talk to the expert. Is there any topic that you went into that said, this is my opinion on this topic, and then after talking to the expert, you had a totally different opinion coming out of it?
So I think it's interesting that you say that, because one of my guests was Mr. Jerry Mazer from Texas 2036. If you guys are familiar with them, they're like a nonpartisan think tank. And at first I was like, how is it possible that, in today's world, both sides of the political spectrum, they're like getting more polarized. People can't seem to agree on anything. But somehow in Texas, they've managed to bridge Democrats and Republicans together to agree on key issues. So I thought that was really interesting. Like, hey, I didn't realize that, people from both political parties were willing to actually work on issues that affect the entire community. And after talking with him, I was like, wow, science and data, they use data-driven analysis. Those really bring people together to solve these key issues. And so I was really amazed at how they did that.
And that's a story that I wish everyone heard, because as you mentioned it, as in today's world, a lot of times there are things that are very polarizing, but hopefully water security, water as a natural resource can be something that brings people together. And, why do you think, you mentioned as a younger adult, a middle-aged adult, but any generation, why is water an important issue?
I think, water is probably, like, a lot of people, I don't know, people probably agree with me on this, but water is the most important resource on our planet. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard, if you go 3 days without water, you die. And, of course, we won't run out of water, because that's just science. It's the water cycle, right?
Right.
But I think in the future years, water events, specifically droughts and floods, they're going to get more extreme if we don't do something about climate change. And it's something that affects everyone around the globe, no matter how far away you are from each other. So, lessons learned in America can be applied to, say, Asia, for example. And here's an example. Indonesia has to move their capital from Jakarta somewhere else because they're extracting too much groundwater. And the same thing is happening over here in America, in Houston. Mm-hmm. And so both of these cities, same thing is happening. And so I think it's really important to understand what's happening on different sides of the world to, bounce ideas off of each other and really collaborate to solve big issues that affect our world today.
And to follow up on something you just mentioned is we actually just had one of our previous podcasts. We had some individuals who were in Germany and toured German water treatment plants, and then those ideas are coming back. But as you mentioned, the water cycle, it's crazy to think that of the amount of water on Earth, 99% is not drinkable and 1% is drinkable.
Yeah.
And think about all the oceans, all the lakes, all the rivers, the polar caps. 1% of all the water on Earth is drinkable. It is a finite resource. And we touched on this previously. You talked about the social interaction. What's one thing that you wish that society, how we approach water sustainability, that we could change? If we had the magic wand, how could we change how society approaches water sustainability?
I think like in today's world, we actually have to start looking more ahead towards the future. I think we have to prepare towards the future. I don't know if climate change is going to get better or worse in the next 50 years. We'll leave the scientists up to that. But what I do know is that if nothing changes, events like flood events, drought events, they're both going to be, pushing towards both extremes. And I really do think that we have to start designing our world so that whether or not these events happen, we can be prepared for them. And I really like how China right now is experimenting with sponge cities. They're actually building their urban centers around, they're planning they're including like trees and forests and, parks for this rainwater to seep into instead of using traditional gray infrastructure. Like I know in Chicago, you guys use a lot of gray infrastructure. Like you guys plan all these, like you guys have the big storm pipes, right?
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, in China, they're actually experimenting with something else. They don't have these big storm pipes. They're using like trees and stuff to soak this rainwater up. So they're finding a way that humans and nature can live in harmony like the world intended us to be. So I really think they're doing a great job at looking towards the future.
And going back to what you mentioned, how can we bring that to other parts of the world?
I think, podcasts like me and you, like ours, really help get these key issues out because, like a lot of our listeners, I probably bet a lot of them have never heard of this idea of like green cities. So hopefully, by listening to our podcast and other forms of media that can help spread this word out, I think, we could one day see these cities and other technologies really start springing up in other places around the world.
I agree. And, as you continue to podcast and talk to guests as well, who's that dream guest? If you had one person you said, I want to talk to them, who is it?
I think the first podcast I ever listened to was like in the water industry was, I think, have you heard of this one? It's called, I think Let's Talk About Water with like Jay Flamigietti, or I think that. No,
I haven't heard that one.
If you haven't heard, yeah, he's from Arizona State. I'd really love to have him on as a guest. Yeah, I'm a big fan of his podcast. Yeah, while I'm doing my work, sometimes listen to him. So I think it'd be really inspiring to one day have him. He's like, I think he used to work for like the government as well, like supervisor for like water and stuff like that. So I think it'd be really interesting guest to have.
Awesome. So as you finish up your high school career, and we know your passion for water, what do you want to do when you graduate from high school? What is that thing? Obviously, I'm hoping, I hope for humanity's sake, you're looking in the water field. But what are you looking to do?
I think I'm planning right now to apply for environmental engineering, because environmental engineering encompasses like basically everything I love. I get to solve pollution issues. I get to deal with water. Yeah, I find it super interesting. But besides that, I really want to expand into, I think, material science and sustainability. Finding a way that, how can we help our industries expand? Because, it's an inevitable. Economic growth is inevitable. Mm-hmm. But how can we actually balance that with nature? We'll need new materials for our batteries. We'll have to find a way to make them more efficient and save the world at the same time. So material science and environmental engineering are two things that I'm really passionate about and looking forward to experimenting with in college.
In true podcast host fashion, you led me right into my next question. So what, you talk about new emerging trends and technologies, that material science. what's something that you want to play a part in or want to learn more about, or as you graduate college, something that you want to look more into?
I think something I want to look more into is actually redefine how we think about our waste. And that actually goes back to the ninth grade experiment I did with sludge. How can we actually utilize the sludge instead of just dumping it into landfills or dumping all these pollutants onto our crops? I think that there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of carbon in there to be sequestered. There's a lot of pollutants. What we don't realize is that the same property that makes sludge so hard to deal with, all these pollutants, like, it actually provides us with a neat opportunity to target these pollutants.
Mm-hmm.
So what if we could, actually there is a technology, I'll get to that right in a second, but it actually targets this sludge and it's able to like sort of destroy the PFAS and microplastics in it. And that technology is something I've been researching since ninth grade. It's called hydrothermal carbonization. And so essentially it takes this sludge, puts it into a reactor at temperatures around 10 to 20 bar and around like 200, 250 Celsius. And then out of this reaction, you get two products. You get a solid, which has similar properties to coal. So the carbon, sludge, that carbon inside usually decomposes to carbon dioxide, right?
Right.
It's actually able to convert that carbon into a solid form that doesn't decompose.
Okay.
So I find that really interesting. I've been experimenting with putting this carbon inside of bricks, which is actually what I did for my last year. So me and my friends like to joke around that I made poop bricks for my science fair. Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting direction to take the world in.
That's something, though, and you look at the worldwide nature of this, that's something that if you could take the human waste and the sludge production into a country or a developing country that needs building supplies, and how do we expand on that? So I want, in our wrap up here, I really want to give you an opportunity of what are some of these things that what type of advice could you give other young high school students, ninth grade students, junior high students on how they can impact their communities?
I think the first step, like I always believe in, is just believe in yourself and trust in the process that you're doing. I would say don't be scared. When I started this out, I was kind of clueless. I didn't know, I was kind of scared, emailing all these professors and media contacts. But I think one thing you guys absolutely need to do is just put yourself out there and not be scared of taking that first step. It's always good to take initiative because you never know what opportunities might come out of it. So I think that's what I want to leave our listeners with today is just take initiative, don't be scared, and trust yourself and trust the process.
I'll leave you with my favorite quote is, be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really think that's a great quote.
Thank you so much for taking your time out of, I assume pre-homework. We have homework to do this afternoon, but
yeah,
I want to thank you for taking time out of your day, coming on B&W Insights. I've learned a bunch, and I appreciate you taking, the chance to come up, talk to us in our cold weather states. You just had some cold weather down in Georgia, but
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, you guys at Baxter Women, for hosting H2O and Beyond on your podcast. I look forward to hearing back from you guys soon and hopefully have another collaboration in the future.
Thank you. Have a great one. All I can say after that interview with Alex is wow. The future of America is bright with students like Alex Hahn, who's hosting a podcast investigating microplastics, making bricks out of sludge. It's impressive. Take a listen to H2O and Beyond. And for our entire team here at Baxter Women, like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks. Have a great day.